What would you risk for the truth? In a city where betrayal lurks in every shadow, Femi and Sade defy a corrupt empire to expose deadly secrets and ignite a revolution. Are you ready to uncover the hidden storm? The Ayodele mansion stood like a palace in the heart of Ikoyi, its towering gates and sprawling gardens marking the wealth of its owners. Inside, the household bustled with maids and drivers, who ensured that every inch of the billionaire family's estate remained pristine. Among them was Sade, a reserved but diligent young woman whose presence had always gone unnoticed until Femi Ayodele, the heir to the empire, began to see her differently. Femi had always been indifferent to the domestic staff, treating them with courtesy but maintaining the strict social divide his mother, Madame Adebisi, enforced. But there was something about Sade, her quiet grace, her piercing brown eyes, the way she hummed soft Yoruba folk songs as she worked, that pulled him in. It started with stolen glances in the hallway, then lingering conversations by the kitchen, and before he knew it, he was seeking her out, desperate for just a moment of her time. Sade, though cautious, found herself drawn to him as well. Femi wasn't just any rich man's son. He was kind, intelligent, and unlike the arrogant elite she had encountered before. But she knew the dangers of their connection. Madame Adebisi was a woman who would never allow her only son to be entangled with a mere maid. One evening, under the cover of the moonlight, Femi finally confessed his feelings. "Sade, I don't care about status. I don't care what my mother says. I just know that I want to be with you." Tears welled in Sade's eyes. She wanted to believe him, to throw caution to the wind. But deep inside, she held a secret that could shatter everything. The Ayodele mansion was a place where secrets never remained hidden for long. The moment Femi and Sade began spending more time together, the whispers started among the staff. The other maids exchanged knowing glances, and the head housekeeper, Mama Esther, began watching Sade with disapproving eyes. Madame Adebisi was a woman of sharp instincts. She noticed the subtle changes in her son's behavior, the way he lingered around the kitchen, how his smile seemed softer, more intimate. And when she saw the way Sade avoided her gaze during morning rounds, suspicion settled in her chest like a heavy stone. One afternoon, as Sade dusted the grand staircase, Madame Adebisi's sharp voice cut through the silence. "Sade, come here." Sade's heart pounded as she approached. "Yes, ma?" Madame Adebisi studied her, her piercing eyes scanning every inch of the young woman's face. "I hope you're not forgetting your place in this house." Sade swallowed hard. "No, ma." "Good, because I will not tolerate any foolishness from the likes of you." Sade nodded, her hands trembling as she gripped her duster. She knew what the older woman was implying. Madame Adebisi would never approve of her, and Femi, and if she found out about their growing affection, Sade's time in the mansion would come to an abrupt end. As soon as Madame Adebisi walked away, Sade exhaled shakily. She had to be careful. Femi's love was a dream, but she was living a reality where people like her had no place in his world. And worse, she knew that if the truth about her past came out, it wouldn't just ruin their love, it could destroy everything. Femi paced in his bedroom, frustration twisting in his chest. He hated the way his mother treated the staff. But what angered him more was the fear he saw in Sade's eyes. Why should love be dictated by wealth and status? Was it so wrong to care for someone beyond material things? That evening, he found her in the backyard, quietly hanging freshly washed sheets on the clothesline. The golden hues of the setting sun bathed her skin, making her look even more beautiful in his eyes. "Sade," he called softly. She stiffened for a moment, but then turned to face him. "Femi, you shouldn't be here." "Why not?" he asked, stepping closer. "Are you afraid of my mother?" "You don't understand." She shook her head. "This isn't just about your mother. It's about me, about us. People like me don't get happy endings with men like you." Femi's jaw tightened. "That's nonsense." "I love you, Sade." Her eyes widened, and for a moment she looked as if she might believe him. But then she turned away, folding a bedsheet with trembling hands. "Love isn't always enough, Femi. Why are you pushing me away?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "If there's something you're hiding, tell me. Let me fight for you." Sade opened her mouth as if to say something, but stopped herself. No, she couldn't tell him, not yet. If he knew the truth, everything between them would fall apart. Instead, she forced a small, painful smile. "Go inside, Femi, please, before someone sees us." Femi exhaled heavily, running a hand through his hair. "I won't give up on us, Sade." As he walked away, Sade clutched the bedsheet tightly, her heart aching. She wanted to believe in love, but she knew better. Because the past had a way of catching up, and when it did, it would ruin everything. The tension in the Ayodele mansion grew thicker with each passing day. Madame Adebisi had not yet uncovered the full truth, but she was watching closely. Sade could feel it. The sharp glances, the unexpected inspections, the way the older woman seemed to appear whenever she and Femi were even remotely close to each other. One evening, as Sade was setting the dining table, Mama Esther, the head housekeeper, pulled her aside. The older woman's face was lined with worry. "Sade, my daughter, listen to me," she whispered urgently. "I don't know what's going on between you and Oga Femi, but if Madam finds out, it will not end well for you." Sade lowered her gaze, guilt pressing on her chest. "Mama Esther, You don't have to explain," the woman interrupted. "I have seen this before. A rich man's son falls for a maid, but in the end, it is the girl who suffers." She placed a firm hand on Sade's shoulder. "Be wise, my child. If you love yourself, stay away from him." Tears burned Sade's eyes, but she nodded. She wanted to believe that her story with Femi would be different. But deep down, she knew Mama Esther was right. Later that night, Femi found Sade alone in the laundry room, folding clothes with slow, deliberate movements. He saw the sadness in her face and immediately knew something was wrong. "Sade, talk to me," he pleaded. She hesitated, then finally whispered, "Femi, we have to stop this before it's too late." Femi's heart clenched. "Is this about my mother, or is there something else?" Sade looked away, her fingers tightening around the fabric in her hands. "It's for your own good," she said softly. "For both of us." But Femi wasn't convinced. He could feel it. Sade was hiding something, and he was determined to find out what it was. Madame Adebisi was not a woman to be fooled. For weeks, she had been watching, waiting, and gathering evidence. She had noticed the way Femi's eyes lingered too long on Sade, the hushed conversations in the corridors, the stolen glances when they thought no one was watching. And now she was sure something was going on between them. One afternoon, she called Mama Esther into her private sitting room. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice cold. "What is going on between my son and that girl?" Mama Esther hesitated, but she knew better than to lie to Madame Adebisi. "Madam, I believe Oga Femi has feelings for Sade." Madame Adebisi's face darkened, her grip tightening on the armrest of her chair. "I knew it," she hissed. "That girl has bewitched him." That evening, as Sade was clearing the dining table, Madame Adebisi stormed into the kitchen, her heels clicking against the tiled floor with sharp intensity. "Sade!" she barked. Sade froze, her heart pounding. "Yes, ma?" Madame Adebisi stepped forward, eyes blazing with fury. "You think I don't see what you're doing? You think you can trap my son with your cheap charms?" Sade's hands trembled. "No, ma, I would never—" "Silence!" Madame Adebisi snapped. "I will not allow a common housemaid to ruin my son's future. Pack your things. You're leaving this house tonight." Tears welled up in Sade's eyes. "Please, ma, I said leave." Madame Adebisi turned to Mama Esther. "Make sure she's gone before midnight." As Sade stood there, shaken and broken, she knew one thing for sure. Her time in the Ayodele mansion had come to an abrupt and painful end. But as she packed her few belongings, one terrifying thought loomed over her. What would happen when Femi found out? Femi returned home late that evening, exhausted from a long day at the office. As he stepped into the mansion, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The air felt tense, and the staff avoided his gaze. Then he saw Mama Esther standing by the staircase, her hands wringing together. "Mama Esther," he said, frowning. "Where is Sade?" The woman's face fell. "Oga Femi." "She's gone." Femi's heart stopped. "What do you mean, gone?" "Madam sent her away," Mama Esther said quietly. "She left a few hours ago." Rage surged through Femi. He stormed into the main living room. where his mother sat sipping tea, looking completely unbothered. "You sent Sade away?" he demanded. Madame Adebisi barely looked up. "Yes, and I should have done it sooner." Femi clenched his fists. "How could you do that?" "She did nothing wrong." Madame Adebisi sighed and placed her cup down. "Listen to me, Femi. That girl is beneath you. She is a common housemaid with nothing to offer. You will not disgrace this family over some foolish infatuation." "This isn't just infatuation," Femi snapped. "I love her." Madame Adebisi's expression turned to steel. "Then you are a fool." Femi's chest heaved with anger. He had always obeyed his mother, always respected her wishes. But this time, she had crossed a line. Without another word, he turned and marched toward the door. "Where do you think you're going?" Madame Adebisi called after him. "To find Sade," Femi said without looking back. As he stepped out into the night, determination burned in his eyes. He would not let his mother dictate his heart. He had to find Sade, no matter what it took. Femi drove through the dark streets of Lagos, his heart pounding with urgency. He had no idea where Sade could be, but he refused to believe she had disappeared without a trace. She had no family in the city, no place to go. Where would she have run to? He tried calling her, but her number was switched off. Frustration clawed at him as he pulled up to a roadside stall, where a few women were selling roasted plantain under the dim glow of a lantern. "Excuse me," he said breathlessly, stepping out of his car. "Have you seen a young woman, about this tall, dark-skinned, carrying a small bag?" She might have looked distressed. The women exchanged glances. One of them, an older woman with a wrapper tied around her chest, pointed down the road. "I saw a girl like that heading toward the bus park earlier this evening. She looked troubled." Femi's heart skipped. "Thank you." He jumped back into his car and sped toward the park. When he arrived, his eyes scanned the crowd of passengers, waiting for buses to different parts of the country. He rushed from one end of the park to the other, searching desperately. Then, just as he was about to lose hope, he spotted her. Sade sat on a wooden bench in the corner of the park, hugging her bag to her chest. Her face was tired, her eyes puffy from crying. "Sade!" Femi called out. She looked up, and for a moment her expression was unreadable. Then panic flickered in her eyes, and she stood up as if to run. Femi rushed to her, grabbing her wrist gently. "Please don't go," he pleaded. "Let's talk." Sade shook her head, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "Femi, you don't understand. I have to leave." "Why?" he asked, desperation in his voice. "Because of my mother?" "I don't care about her rules. I just want to be with you." Sade looked away, biting her lip. "It's not just your mother, Femi. There's something you don't know. There's something I've been hiding." Femi's breath caught. "What is it, Sade?" But before she could answer, a deep voice interrupted them. "Sade, is this man bothering you?" Femi turned sharply to see a tall, broad-shouldered man approaching them. His face was partially shadowed by the dim lights of the park, but his presence was commanding. Sade's entire body tensed, and at that moment Femi realized whoever this man was, he had something to do with Sade's secret. Femi instinctively stepped in front of Sade, his body tense with protectiveness. The man approaching them had a quiet menace about him, broad shoulders, a hardened face, and eyes that held an unsettling intensity. "Sade," Femi said, glancing at her. "Who is this?" Sade swallowed hard, gripping the strap of her bag as if it was the only thing holding her together. "His name is Tunde," she whispered. Femi turned back to the stranger. "And who exactly are you to her?" Tunde folded his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. "The better question is, who are you to her?" He looked Femi up and down, his expression unreadable. "Some rich man's son playing the hero?" Femi's patience snapped. "I don't care who you are," he said firmly. "Sade doesn't belong to you." "She's free to make her own choices." Sade flinched at those words, but Tunde only chuckled darkly. "Oh, is that what she told you?" He turned to Sade, his voice lowering. "Did you tell him the truth, or are you still running?" Femi's pulse quickened. "What truth?" Sade took a shaky breath, her hands trembling. "Femi, Before she could finish, Tunde grabbed her wrist. "We're leaving," he said. "No!" Femi stepped forward, pulling Sade back. "She's not going anywhere with you." Tunde's jaw clenched, his calm demeanor cracking. "You don't understand what you're getting yourself into, rich boy." Femi tightened his grip on Sade's hand. "Then explain it to me." Sade yanked her hand free from both men, her voice breaking. "Stop it, both of you." She turned to Femi, her eyes filled with pain. "I didn't want you to find me, because I didn't want you to know the truth." Femi's breath hitched. "What truth, Sade?" She looked between him and Tunde, her shoulders shaking. Then with a voice barely above a whisper, she finally said it. "Femi, Tunde is my husband." The words hit Femi like a hammer to the chest. His entire body froze, his mind struggling to process what she had just said. "Husband?" He turned to Tunde, who now wore a satisfied smirk, then back to Sade, whose face was streaked with silent tears. Everything suddenly made sense. The secrecy, the hesitation, the fear in her eyes. Sade wasn't just keeping a secret. She was running from one. Femi felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. His mind reeled with Sade's words, but his heart refused to accept them. Husband, it didn't make sense. She had never mentioned being married. How could she have kept something this big from him? He took a step back, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, is this true?" Tears streamed down her face as she nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "Yes." Tunde let out a low chuckle, his arms crossed. "She didn't tell you, did she?" He shook his head. "Rich boys like you think you can claim whatever you want, but Sade is mine." Femi clenched his fists. "If she's yours, then why was she running from you?" He turned to Sade, his expression a mix of hurt and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me, Sade? Why?" Sade wiped at her tears, her hands shaking. "Because I was scared, Femi. I was scared of losing you. And I was scared of him." She cast a nervous glance at Tunde. Femi caught the look and felt his anger rise. "What did he do to you?" Tunde scoffed. "Watch your mouth, boy. This is between me and my wife." Sade flinched at the word, but Femi stepped closer to her. "No, Sade, tell me the truth." She swallowed hard, as if gathering the courage to say the words out loud. "Tunde, he's not just my husband. He's the reason I ran away." Femi's eyes darkened. "Did he hurt you?" Sade let out a shaky breath. "He controlled me. He made my life unbearable. He treated me like his property." She looked up at Femi, pain written all over her face. "I left him, Femi. I ran. I had no money, no family to turn to. That's how I ended up working at your house." Femi's chest tightened as he processed her words. This wasn't just about a past relationship. This was about survival. Tunde sighed dramatically. "Enough of this nonsense. Sade, we're leaving now." "No," Femi said, stepping in front of her protectively. "She's not going anywhere with you." Tunde's smirk faded. "You don't want to make me your enemy, rich boy." Femi's jaw tightened. "I don't care who you are. If you ever hurt her, you'll regret it." Sade clutched Femi's arm, fear in her eyes. "Femi, please, don't do this. He's dangerous." But Femi wasn't backing down. He had lost Sade once. He wasn't going to lose her again. Tunde's eyes flickered with something dark before he let out a low chuckle. "You want to fight for her?" He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Then be ready, because this isn't over." With that, he turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving Sade trembling and Femi seething with rage. As he pulled Sade into his arms, one thing became clear. This was just the beginning of a dangerous battle. And Femi wasn't going to lose. Sade trembled in Femi's arms, her entire body tense with fear. Tunde had left, but his presence still lingered like a dark shadow over her soul. Femi cupped her face gently, tilting her chin up so she could meet his eyes. "Sade, you don't have to be afraid. I won't let him hurt you." She shook her head, fresh tears sliding down her cheeks. "You don't understand, Femi. Tunde doesn't give up. He will come back." Femi's jaw tightened. "Then let him come." "I'm not afraid of him." Sade pulled away slightly, looking at him with desperation. "It's not just about you. You don't know what he's capable of. He's connected. He knows people. If he wants to make my life miserable, he will." Femi exhaled sharply, his hands resting on his hips. He hated feeling powerless, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't going to let Sade live in fear. "Then we'll leave," he said suddenly. Sade blinked. "What?" "We'll go somewhere safe," Femi insisted. "Somewhere he can't reach you." Sade shook her head. "I can't just disappear again, Femi. I tried that once, and look where it got me." Femi ran a hand through his hair in frustration. He wanted to protect her, to shield her from whatever nightmare she had escaped. But how could he do that if she didn't trust that he could? "Sade, I love you," he said, his voice raw. "I don't care about your past. I don't care about Tunde. All I care about is you." She let out a shaky breath, her heart warring between love and fear. "Love isn't always enough, Femi," she whispered. "Then let me prove to you that it is," he said firmly. For a moment, Sade allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, Femi was right. Maybe love could conquer the fear that had held her captive for so long. But deep down, she knew the truth. Tunde wasn't done with her yet, and this fight was far from over. Femi didn't take Sade back to his family's mansion. He knew his mother would only make things worse. And with Tunde lurking in the shadows, Sade needed somewhere safe. Instead, he drove to a discreet hotel on the mainland, booking a private suite under a different name. As they stepped into the quiet room, Sade sank onto the bed, rubbing her arms as if trying to shake off the weight of her past. Femi sat beside her, watching her carefully. "We need a plan," he said. "You can't keep running forever." Sade sighed. "And what do you suggest?" "Tunde won't just let me go. He sees me as his property." Femi's hands balled into fists. "Marriage isn't ownership, Sade. You deserve to be free." She turned to him, pain and uncertainty in her eyes. "I thought I was free when I ran away. But now I've put you in danger too." Femi reached for her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "I don't care about the danger. I just want you safe." Sade swallowed hard. "There's only one way out of this. Femi, if I go to the police and tell them what he's done..." She hesitated. "But Tunde has connections. If he finds out I'm trying to expose him, he'll come after both of us." Femi nodded, his mind working fast. "Then we don't go to the police, not yet. We need leverage, something to make him back off." Sade bit her lip, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "There is something. But it's risky." Femi leaned in. "Tell me." She took a deep breath. "Tunde has secrets, illegal dealings, things he would never want exposed. Before I left, I overheard him talking about something big, something that could land him in serious trouble." Femi's eyes darkened. "Then that's what we use." Sade hesitated. "It's not that simple. If we get involved in this, there's no turning back." Femi squeezed her hand. "Then we do it together." Sade looked into his eyes, searching for any doubt, but there was none. He was willing to fight for her, no matter the cost. And deep down she knew this battle was just beginning. Sade lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling while Femi slept beside her. His presence was comforting, but her mind was restless. If they were going to take on Tunde, they had to be careful. He was powerful, connected, and ruthless. Her hands clenched into fists as memories flooded back. His threats, his manipulation, the bruises she had hidden beneath long sleeves. She had spent years trapped in fear, but now, for the first time, she had someone willing to fight for her. She couldn't let that go to waste. By morning, she had made up her mind. As Femi stretched awake, rubbing his eyes, she sat beside him, determination in her gaze. "I know where to find proof against Tunde." Femi sat up instantly. "Where?" She took a deep breath. "His office. He used to keep records of all his transactions, bribery payments, illegal deals, everything. If we can get our hands on them, we can expose him." Femi frowned. "That sounds risky, Sade." "It is," she admitted, "but it's the only way to make him leave me alone for good." Femi exhaled sharply. "All right, then we do this carefully. Do you know if he still keeps those records?" Sade hesitated. "I'm not sure. But I know he trusts his assistant, Osas. If we can get to him, we might find a way in." Femi thought for a moment. "Then we need to find Osas." Sade nodded. "And we have to move fast. If Tunde suspects anything, he won't just come after me. He'll come after you too." Femi took her hands in his. "Then we make sure we don't fail." A sense of urgency filled the air. They were stepping into dangerous territory. But Sade knew one thing. She wasn't running anymore. This time, she was fighting back. Femi wasted no time. He and Sade checked out of the hotel and drove to a quieter part of town where Tunde's assistant, Osas, was known to frequent. Sade had remembered that he often visited a small bar near Ikeja after work, a place where people like him conducted shady deals in the shadows. As they parked outside the dimly lit bar, Femi turned to Sade. "Are you sure about this? If Osas is loyal to Tunde, this could backfire." Sade exhaled. "I know. But Osas is greedy. If we play our cards right, we can make him talk. Femi nodded. All right, stay close to me. They stepped inside the smoky bar, the scent of cheap liquor and cigarettes hanging in the air. Men sat around wooden tables, some engaged in hushed conversations, others watching a football match on a flickering TV. Then Sade spotted him. Osas sat in the corner, sipping a bottle of beer, his phone in his hand. He looked the same, medium height, stocky, and always dressed in flashy clothes. Sade took a deep breath. Let me talk to him first. He knows me. Femi hesitated but nodded. I'll be right behind you. She approached Osas cautiously. The moment he looked up and saw her, his eyes widened in surprise. Sade, he set his beer down, scanning her from head to toe. What are you doing here? I need your help, she said, keeping her voice steady. Osas chuckled, leaning back in his chair. Help? The last time I checked, you disappeared. Tunde was furious. His expression turned curious. Now you suddenly show up? What do you want? Sade glanced at Femi, who stood a few steps behind her, watching carefully. She turned back to Osas. I know Tunde keeps records of his dealings. I need them. Osas raised an eyebrow, then laughed. You must be joking. You think I'd betray my boss just like that? Femi stepped forward, placing a thick envelope on the table. We're willing to make it worth your while. Osas eyed the envelope, his greed evident. He tapped his fingers on the table. This is risky. If Tunde finds out, I'm a dead man. Sade leaned in. Not if you help us expose him before he even realizes what's happening. Osas hesitated. Then he sighed. All right, I might know where to find what you're looking for. But if I do this, I need a guarantee, more than just money. Femi frowned. What kind of guarantee? Osas smirked. Protection. If Tunde comes for me, I need to know I won't be alone. Femi exchanged a glance with Sade. They were already taking a risk. What was one more? Deal, Femi said. Now tell us where to find the files. Osas lowered his voice. Tunde keeps his most important records in a private office, hidden inside his nightclub. He glanced around as if someone might be listening. If you want those files, you'll have to break in. Sade's heart pounded. This was bigger than she had imagined. Femi clenched his jaw. Then we'll find a way in. Osas shook his head. I hope you know what you're doing. Sade wasn't sure, but one thing was certain. There was no turning back now. Femi gripped the steering wheel tightly as he and Sade drove away from the bar. The weight of their plan hung heavy between them. Breaking into Tunde's nightclub was dangerous. One wrong move, and they could end up in serious trouble. Sade exhaled sharply. Are we really doing this? Femi nodded, his jaw set with determination. Yes. If we want to end this, we need proof. Osas had given them the necessary details. Tunde's nightclub, Empire Lounge, was more than just a hotspot for the wealthy. It was a front for his illegal dealings. The files they needed were locked in his private office on the second floor, accessible only through a restricted hallway guarded by his most trusted men. Femi glanced at Sade. Do you think you can still move around unnoticed in that place? She bit her lip, thinking. It's been a while, but I remember some of the staff. If I can get past the entrance, I might be able to blend in. Femi's eyes darkened. I don't like the idea of you going in alone. We don't have a choice, Sade said. If you go in, you'll stand out immediately. But if I pretend I'm looking for work or visiting an old friend, I might get in without suspicion. Femi hesitated. He hated the thought of her walking into danger, but she was right. All right, he said reluctantly. But I won't be far. The moment you get in, text me. Sade nodded. And if I don't text in 20 minutes, assume something's wrong. Femi clenched his fists. He wasn't used to feeling powerless. But this wasn't a battle he could fight with money or influence. It required stealth, patience, and trust. As they pulled up a block away from the nightclub, Sade took a deep breath. Time to face my past. Femi squeezed her hand. Be careful. Sade nodded and slipped out of the car, her heart pounding as she approached the entrance. The bouncer barely glanced at her, more focused on managing the crowd. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. The music was deafening, the air thick with cigarette smoke and expensive perfume. Nothing had changed. The flashing neon lights, the laughter, the men whispering deals in dark corners, it was all the same. She moved carefully through the crowd, keeping her head down. Then she spotted someone familiar, Zubi. one of the bartenders who had always been kind to her. If anyone could help, it was him. Sade approached the counter. "Zubi." He looked up, his eyes widening in shock. "Sade, what the hell are you doing here?" She leaned in, lowering her voice. "I need your help." Zubi glanced around nervously. "Do you have any idea how much trouble you'd be in if Tunde knew you were here?" Sade swallowed. "That's why I need you. I need to get to his office." Zubi cursed under his breath. "You're insane." "Please, Zubi," she pleaded. "This is my only chance." Zubi rubbed his face, looking torn. Then he sighed. "There's a staff entrance behind the bar. It leads to the restricted hallway. But Sade, if you get caught, I can't protect you." "I know," she said. "Just tell me when it's clear." Zubi shook his head. "You're crazy." Sade's hands trembled, but she steadied herself. "I don't have a choice." As Zubi turned to check the hallway, she sent a quick text to Femi. "I'm in." Now there was no turning back. Sade's heart pounded as she waited behind the bar, her palms sweaty despite the cool air inside the nightclub. Every second felt like an eternity as she watched. Zubi scanned the hallway leading to Tunde's private office. Finally, he turned back to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "And now's your chance. The guards just left for their smoke break, but they won't be gone for long." Sade swallowed hard. "Thank you, Zubi." He sighed. "Just don't get caught, Sade. If Tunde finds you—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. She gave him a small nod before slipping behind the bar, moving quickly but carefully through the dimly lit staff corridor. The hallway was narrow, lined with locked doors. At the end, she spotted the one she needed, Tunde's office. Reaching into her pocket, she pulled out the spare key Osaz had given them. Her hands trembled as she inserted it into the lock, her pulse racing. Click! The door swung open. She slipped inside and quietly shut it behind her. The office was exactly as she remembered, sleek, modern, and intimidating. A large mahogany desk sat in the center, papers neatly stacked beside a laptop. Shelves lined the walls, filled with expensive liquor bottles and books that no one actually read. She didn't have much time. Sade moved quickly to the desk, searching through the drawers. Bills, invoices, and receipts. None of them were what she needed. Then she saw it, a locked file cabinet on the right side of the room. She tugged at it, but it wouldn't budge. Damn it. Frantically, she searched the desk for a key. Just as her fingers brushed against a small metallic object, she heard footsteps in the hallway. Her breath caught in her throat. The guards! She grabbed the key and crouched behind the desk, her heart pounding in her ears. The footsteps grew louder. Voices murmured just outside the door. Then the doorknob turned. Sade's blood ran cold. If they found her here, it was over. The door creaked open. A beam of light spilled into the room. She held her breath, pressing herself against the desk, praying they wouldn't step inside. A voice muttered something. Then, after a tense pause, the door closed again. The footsteps faded. Sade exhaled shakily, barely believing her luck. She couldn't waste another second. She scrambled to the cabinet, jammed the key into the lock, and yanked it open. Her eyes widened. Inside were stacks of documents, bank statements, transaction logs, even photographs. Evidence of Tunde's dirty deals. This was it. She grabbed as many files as she could, stuffing them into her bag. Her hands shook as she zipped it shut. Then she sent a quick text to Femi. "I got it. Meet me outside." Clutching the bag tightly, she slipped out of the office, her body thrumming with adrenaline. She had done it, but she wasn't safe yet. Sade moved swiftly through the dim hallway, her pulse hammering in her ears. The weight of the stolen documents pressed against her side, but she couldn't slow down, not now. She had what she came for, but getting out unnoticed was another challenge. She peeked around the corner, searching for an exit. The hallway was still empty, but the guards could return at any moment. Taking a deep breath, she moved forward, careful to keep her footsteps light. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket. A message from Femi. "I'm outside, hurry." She exhaled. Almost there. As she neared the bar, Zubi caught sight of her and stiffened. He gestured subtly toward the entrance. "Go now," he muttered under his breath, pretending to wipe the counter. Sade nodded and slipped through the crowded club, weaving between dancing bodies and drunken customers. The flashing neon lights disoriented her, but she forced herself to focus. Just a few more steps. "Hey!" A deep voice froze her in place. She turned slowly, her heart stopping when she saw him, one of Tunde's guards, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a scar on his cheek. He squinted at her, recognition dawning in his eyes. "Sade?" Her breath caught. I was just—" Before she could finish, he reached for his radio. She didn't think, she ran. Shouts erupted behind her as she shoved past people, ignoring their protests. The exit was in sight. Then bang! A gunshot rang out. Screams filled the nightclub. Panic spread like wildfire as people ducked and scattered. Sade's body jolted, but she kept running. She didn't know if the shot was meant for her or just a warning. But she wasn't about to find out. She burst through the entrance, gasping for air. Femi's car screeched to a stop in front of her. The passenger door flew open. "Get in!" he shouted. Without hesitation, she dove inside, slamming the door shut. Femi hit the gas, tires screeching as they sped away into the night. Sade clutched the bag to her chest, her entire body shaking. "We did it," she breathed. Femi's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. Not yet. She followed his gaze through the rear window. 2 black SUVs had pulled out of the nightclub parking lot, chasing them. Femi's grip tightened on the steering wheel as the black SUVs gained on them. Their headlights cut through the darkness, closing in fast. He swerved onto an empty road, his heart pounding. "They're following us," Sade gasped, clutching the stolen documents. "I know," Femi said through gritted teeth. "Hold on." He pressed down on the accelerator, the car surging forward. The city lights blurred as they sped through the streets. Weaving through late-night traffic, the SUVs didn't back off. Sade turned in her seat, her breath hitching. "Femi, they're getting closer." He glanced at the rearview mirror. Tunde's men weren't just following, they were trying to box them in. One SUV sped up, moving alongside them, its tinted window rolling down. Then she saw it, the barrel of a gun. "Femi, duck!" Bang! A gunshot shattered the side mirror, glass spraying into the car. Femi swerved hard, barely avoiding a collision. Horns blared as they shot past startled drivers. "Damn it," he cursed. "They're serious." Sade's hands shook as she fumbled for her phone. "We need to call the police." Femi shook his head. "No time. We need to lose them first." He spotted an upcoming turn, a narrow alleyway between 2 buildings. Without hesitating, he yanked the wheel, sending the car skidding into the alley. The walls were tight, barely enough space for their car. The SUVs hesitated for a second, then one followed, scraping its side against the concrete as it forced its way in. "They're still coming!" Sade cried. Femi's mind raced. Then he saw it, a stack of metal trash bins ahead. "Hold on!" At the last second, he jerked the wheel, sending the car crashing through the bins. The impact sent debris flying, blocking the alley behind them. The pursuing SUV slammed into the wreckage, tires screeching. "They're stuck!" Sade gasped. Femi didn't slow down. He sped out of the alley, merging onto a main road. The second SUV was still behind them, but they had gained some distance. "There's a bridge up ahead," Femi said. "If we can cross it, we can disappear into the mainland." Sade nodded, gripping her seat. "Just don't stop." Femi didn't plan to. The chase wasn't over yet. Femi's foot remained heavy on the accelerator as they approached the bridge. The second SUV was still behind them, relentless in its pursuit. Sade clenched the stolen documents against her chest, her breath coming in quick gasps. "They're not giving up," she said, glancing back. Femi's jaw tightened. "Then we make them." Ahead, the bridge stretched over the dark waters of the lagoon. The road was mostly empty at this hour, save for a few cars in the distance. But if they didn't lose their pursuers now, they'd be in open view, an easy target. The SUV behind them suddenly surged forward. "They're trying to ram us!" Sade cried. Femi swerved just in time, the SUV's front bumper barely missing their car. He gritted his teeth, his mind racing for a way out. Then he saw it, a construction site just before the bridge. The road was partially blocked with barriers and traffic cones. An idea formed. "Hold tight," Femi warned. Instead of heading straight for the bridge, he veered sharply to the right, cutting through the construction zone. Their car bounced over uneven ground, kicking up dust and gravel. Workers in reflective vests shouted in protest, but Femi didn't slow down. Sade turned back in time to see the SUV hesitate. The driver hadn't expected the sudden detour. Come on, Femi muttered. Then crash. Watch out for part 2. Thanks for watching. Please do well to subscribe, as we feel honored to serve you great and interesting stories weekly. Love you all.